Hello, my name is Melody Simakov, and in this lesson we're going to be using how we can master Lightroom to bring back as much of the color and data in our photo with local adjustments and with the color adjustments. So we're going to start from here with the photo, as you can see on my screen, and we're going to end with something like this. So you can see we're going to learn how we can pull back a lot of the color data in our file. But let's stop talking about what we're going to do and let's get into it.
So we're taking off from the point where we left our photo in the last episode. You should note that we don't have to watch the last episode to understand the things we're going to be doing in this episode, but the whole point of my editing is to do a lot of small adjustments in different places in the process that together these many changes form one vision. So all the things we're doing are aligned with each other. So I would really recommend, if you haven't, to go watch the episode before this. But if you just want to learn the techniques in this episode, you can easily also do that and everything will make sense. So we have a picture looking like this now. It's nice and flat. We recovered a lot of data. If you look here, we pulled the highlights back, we put the whites down, we have taken a lot of the very dramatic whites and blacks and made them into nuances of color. So we have recovered a lot in this photo, but it's also gotten to a point where it's very flat. Last episode I was talking about global adjustments and local adjustments. The global adjustments are the ones that are affecting the entire photo, like when we take the exposure slider down and up, the exposure of the entire photo is changing. This episode we're going to focus more on the local adjustments, where we can change small things in the photo without affecting everything. And these adjustments are so important and so powerful because this is the part where I say you can be creative. This is where you can start making your vision, because you can decide where is the person watching the photo going to be looking, what do we want to highlight, how do we want to tell the story. This is all done in the local adjustments. So as I said last time in this previous lesson, don't be creative in the global adjustments, be creative in the local adjustments. So that is what we're going to be doing here. You can see we put the highlights a lot down, and what it did was it took the brightest parts in the picture and pulled them down, but it does it to everything in the photo. And actually I kind of like the glow of having high highlights on the boat and the water. You can see up here in the sky it was very essential that we put down the highlight slider like this, but I didn't really want to affect all the things happening down here in the boat and in the water, but we actually did that. So instead of pulling the highlight slider down, I'm going to return it to normal by double clicking it, and instead we're going to use a local adjustment to only affect what's going on in the sky. So here we have our three local adjustments in this panel up here. The first one is the linear gradient. What it does is that it takes it just linearly fades in an adjustment. So right now I have exposure on, and you can see how gradually the exposure from the top to the bottom is gonna fade in. So we wanted to recover the highlights in the top but not the water down here. We can use a linear gradient for this. I'm going to take the highlights down. I'm going to put the gradient a little further down, and we can even take the exposure a little down to bring out the sky a little more. There, you see this part of the sky is coming out way more now than it was before. One interesting thing you can do in the newer versions of Lightroom is if you scroll down, here you have our local adjustments we're applying right now. I'm scrolling down, and there's this thing called the range mask. In the range mask we can check the color, luminance, to make rules for what the effect is actually going on. So a mask is just like in real life with a mask, it's deciding which things you're hiding and which things you're showing. So if we make a color mask, we can click on this eyedropper and we can take it, hold shift to mark a bigger area and say we want to put the exposure down here, and in that way Photoshop knows what we want to actually put the exposure down on. We also want it up here to put the exposure down, but we don't really want it here, so I'm not going to affect this area. So in that way we can make our linear gradient even more precise. And if you take this, it's gonna smoothen it the more you go up, so we're gonna have a more natural transition. If you take it to the left side, you can see everything, the data in the file is pushed too much because the program is not that good at making the transitions natural. So in general, always take this to the right to get a natural transition. I'm just pressing this is like a back button to delete what we just did, so you can see the before and after, and then I'm pressing Command Z to bring it back. And as you can see, we've just affected the brightness of the sky and the cloud, so we brought that back. In this way we haven't touched anything down here. I'm going to press enter to save that adjustment, and you can see now we have this dot here, which when we click on linear gradient, this dot will represent that change. We can always click on it, and now we can go back and change these things if we want to add up something. One thing I also sometimes will apply when making this sky thing to bring out even more data is a little bit of the dehaze that I was talking about in global adjustments. Now that we're using a local adjustment, we can actually put a little bit of it in, and you can see how it brings back details in the sky by removing some of the natural haze. Again, be very careful, it's a very strong tool, but just taking a little bit of this punch can be very, very, very strong. And the more you take of the dehaze, the darker the photo also gets, so you can compensate by bringing back a little more of the highlights. So now we got a big punch of contrast and detail in our sky back with the radial filter. Another adjustment is the radial filter. This makes the same effect but in a circular motion. So now I'm going to make a radial effect down where the sun is. The sun is a little beneath the trees here, so it's coming from here. You can see it's a little brighter, but since we just put the exposure down on everything in this area, we kind of took out some of the feeling of where the sun is coming from. We still want to kind of restore that feeling of the sun beaming and having brightness. So we're marking the area around where the sun comes from, and we're actually taking the highlights up a little here. And you can see we're kind of getting the glow back. One thing when you're making a radial filter is make sure to make 100 in feather. That just smoothens out everything we're doing, so it doesn't look too dramatic and unnatural. So you can see if I remove what we just did, you can see it was a little more flat, and now we took out a little more of the magical feeling and brought it back. You can also, when doing an effect like this, take down the clarity a little and take the dehaze down a little, just make it feel a little more magical and smooth where the sun is coming from. So I'm going to press enter, and we have saved that adjustment as well. One more thing that is very important to notice when you're doing all these adjustments is you can always click the reset button to see, is there anything from the original file where we lost something when we restored all of the things and made it kind of flat. And when we see here is, okay, this fork here is actually a little boring now. It used to fill more and be more dramatic. We can bring that back with the last of our local adjustment tools, the brush. Clicking on the brush, you can, on the Mac, you can add 2 fingers and go up and down to adjust the size of the brush. You can click here. What this does is that we can brush in our effect only on the parts that we want to. Like, we can be very precise with this tool, and it's great if you make sure to press this thing called Auto Mask, because actually Lightroom is really good at this Auto Mask. What Auto Mask does is it automatically detects the edges, so Lightroom will attempt to only affect the things you want to affect. So when I'm brushing here, you can see it's getting all of the nice fog, but it's not touching all the mountain in the background. So now I'm just brushing in this effect on the foggy areas. Because I'm recording this, it's a little slower. Usually it should be way more immediate. I'm just gonna brush in some. You can see the only thing I've done here is bring the exposure up. Just brushing it in. And one thing we always have to make sure when we're doing adjustments like this is we can start having a dramatic adjustment to get the feeling of what we're actually affecting, and then afterwards we need to make sure to dial it back. Again, like I've said so many times, many small adjustments are the way to go. Don't make one super big adjustment like this, it's gonna seem unnatural. So I'm going to bring the exposure down again to the neutral point. I'm gonna bring it just a little up. And then I'm going to go to the dehaze, and I'm going to haze it a little more by taking it to the left. So we get a little more. Oh, that's too much. Bring it down again. One thing to notice is that we can always select erase down here to make sure that we bring back. If we thought something was too much, we can just erase it slowly. You can also see here we have the flow, which is the rate that we're erasing at, so we don't want it too high, so we can just slowly erase things. I think up here it was a little too dramatic. Just going to slowly erase some of it by going over with the eraser brush selected. One other very important tip when doing local adjustments in Lightroom is that you can always press the button O on your keyboard and you will now see the mask. The red is where you're actually affecting something. So now we can see I've erased most of the red up here, but we still have this affected. So that's a very good idea. Always click on the O to confirm what you're actually affecting. You can just click O again and we will go back to seeing our actual adjustments. So I'm going to press enter to save that adjustment. So you can see now we have effectively brought back some of the punch of the fog here. Now this is local adjustments in Lightroom. They are very strong and I recommend using them. Make a lot of small adjustments. We could also make a lot of adjustments on the boat here and stuff, but usually I just go with the simple ones. That my philosophy when using Lightroom is still we want to bring back the details, we want to make it clean and natural. So you could start brushing in all the things in the boats, but I usually save that for Photoshop because Photoshop can make even more precise local adjustments. So these adjustments are really good to make because Lightroom is really good at processing our data. So making them in the sky and stuff here is really nice, but I'm saving still space for making adjustments later in Photoshop. If you don't want to use Photoshop and just Lightroom, you can just go crazy here with local adjustments. Just remember, make many small adjustments. That is way better than making a few really dramatic ones. That's how you can make sure to always make it feel natural. And when making adjustments with the brush, I recommend always zooming in. I'm doing this on the Mac with just 2 fingers going in here, and you can always brush while you're zoomed in. That way you can be way more precise in your work. Take your time with it, don't rush it. I'm just gonna zoom out again here. So that was the local adjustments. Now to master the rest of the Lightroom adjustments, we can go down here into the color section. Now we are back to global adjustments. You can do more local adjustments with the brush. You can apply color with the brush in Lightroom. I prefer not to do it and not to change too much of the temperature because again I feel like Photoshop does a better job doing that. But the global adjustments for colors in Lightroom are actually really powerful, and as long as we're careful with them, we can do wonders with them. Remember, now we're doing global adjustments, so our philosophy is to bring back details and don't change too much and be extending the dimension. I'm going to take red color here, and you can see already now I know the red color will affect the boats, and I know it will affect the sky. So when you take the luminance down, you can see how it crunches the saturation on the brightness of the clouds. So when we take it just a little down, again, I'm very careful now. We're making it a little more transition in the color. If you take it too much down, again, I can show you, we start to get weird artifacts, and you know, the software is just not strong enough to process the data without weird artifacts showing up. And artifacts are the weird smudges and weird objects that start to appear when you push a file too much. So we want to push our data as much as possible, but we want to avoid getting artifacts. So again, it doesn't hurt to take the sliders all the way to the left, all the way to the right to see the effect that we're doing. But in the end, when we're doing adjustments, do minimal ones. So I'm just going to take the luminance back a little to recover some of the detail here. I'm just going to take up the red color a little to increase the saturation. You can see what we're doing now. We have to be careful not to get artifacts here. Just a little we can fix later. What we're doing now is just bringing back more details in this cloud. And we need to be aware that we're doing global adjustments. So I'm also going to go down here and look what did this do with the boat. You can always click this thing here to hide all the adjustments that you did and deactivate them. It's a good way of deactivating and activating again to see the change that you did. So you can see we did a change here to the sky. We made it a little more naturally transitioned into a more dark red color, and we didn't really affect the boats at all yet. So now we're going to go down to the orange color. One thing that's important, and we also can look at, is the hue of the red color. When changing the hue, you change where the color is in the color spectrum. So if we take this to the left, we're gonna get a more dark red, more purplish kind of tint. And if we take it to the right, we're gonna get a more yellow orange. So that's a very powerful tool and a very dangerous one. In general, my rule is still we're using Lightroom to extend the dynamic range and not compress. So if you take something that's red here and you bring it all the way to the left, then you're pushing everything to the left, and you see now this feels like just one red color here surrounding. We want to always think about, are we compressing the colors by doing this? You see, a little to the left, we're actually making it feel like there's more colors, but all the way we're compressing the colors too much together, so we ruin the transition in the colors, and now we just have one really red color. So always make small adjustments in hue. That's very important. A lot of people will just go all the way to one side because they like the more orange feel, but they're destroying all the pixel data in this process. So now I'm going down to the orange hue, and again I'm just going to see what it does by taking it all the way to the left. You see now it's just one color, and all the way to the right. And you can see already now here that by moving it to the left, we're compressing more colors than moving it to the right. Here we do still have like some feeling of more color. That's a good rule of thumb, meaning that taking the slider a little to the right can have a nice effect. Again, we need to also consider the boat. This is also an orange object. So I'm going to take the slider back and towards the right. And you can see doing it too much kind of does remove some of the dynamic feel, but taking this a little to the right actually helps it separate from the more red boat over here. So you can see when I take it to the left, the red boat and this will both appear very red, but when you're taking it to the right, you are separating them a little as considered to the normal state. Again, we're doing local adjustments, and that means we have to be careful we're doing global adjustments, and that means we need to be careful with doing big adjustments. So taking it just a little to the right helps us separate these two in color, taking up the saturation just a little. And we also like what it did to the cloud up here by taking it a little to the right. So again, just small adjustments, and we can always click off this to see everything we did now before and everything we did now. So you can see we just put a little more dynamic feeling into the color so far. Now we're going to do the same with yellow. Just taking it all the way to the left to see what it does. Taking it all the way to the right. This is mostly affecting the boat here. And since the boat has the most of the yellow color, we can again separate it a little more from the other objects. And if you want to tell the story a little more about this boat, if this is your main subject, then this is a good way to make people catch the attention of this boat, because when we're taking this yellow a little more to the right side with the when we're taking this boat a little more to the right side with the hue, we're separating it. So this has a nice effect for the storytelling. So I'm just going to take the saturation up a little bit. Let's see what luminance does. We really don't like taking the luminance down here because it fades too much on the highlight detail. The luminance is kind of the white amount of white color you have. When you take it up, there's more white in the color now. And for this boat, I actually preferred way more having a little more brightness in it. So we're going to take the luminance up a little. The green color here, green color is a weird one in Lightroom, because usually Lightroom is not really good at taking out the green color and understanding what is green. So usually you will not see, unless you have very green colors, you will not see this slider do too much. You can see I'm taking the luminance down and up. We're affecting a little, but we're not affecting a lot. I'm just taking down the luminance a little, and I'm taking down the saturation a little. Does the hue change anything? In this case, we don't want our water to feel green because it's kind of a poisonous color. I'm just going to take it a little to the right, but not too much. We don't want to compress the color completely. The aqua is going to affect the water a lot. And one thing to keep in mind when we're doing this is if we took the aqua all the way to the left here, we're kind of separating now the water and the sky. The water and the sky are two different colors. Now if we take it all the way to the right, we just kind of, even if you like this blue more, we just kind of killed a lot of the dynamic feel in this photo, because now we just have blue and blue. What made the photo a little more unique was that the water and the sky had a little different tones. So even though I like to take the hue a little to the right, I don't want to go too crazy, because we are compressing some of the dynamic feeling in the photo by doing this. But we also don't want the poisonous green colored lake, so I'm taking it just a little to the right in the hue. I'm checking the luminance. Definitely prefer a little less luminance to recover a little more of the color detail. I'm just going to take the saturation up just a little bit. And now we're checking for the blue. You can see the blue is mainly affecting the sky here. And you can see how if we push it too much, we're getting weird artifacts in the sky. So we have to be very careful with this. But taking it down just a little here, even pushing it a little, we are bringing some more details back in the sky that I like. And again, you can see if I take the hue this way, we're taking the hue towards the water, and this does a really poor effect of compressing the dynamic feeling. So we don't want to take the blue that way. At the same time, I don't want to take it this way, because I hate when a sky has this purple color. It doesn't feel natural for me. So I'm actually going to leave this one unadjusted, because I like where the blue is right now. And the purple, let's see what it affects. Oh, it affects around the clouds here. You can see this was really dangerous. We just made this look very unnatural. I think if we take up the saturation though, we might make the transition here a little more natural between the different colors in the cloud. So I'm just going to take up the saturation a little bit. I'm going to check with the hue what happens when we slide it. We don't want to slide it to the left. I'm just going to zoom in so we can see what we're doing here. Now we just made this feel green. We take it to the right. This makes way more sense. Now you can see it's blending more together. But again, weird things are happening, so we need to be careful. But just taking a little of it, not too much saturation, helps make the transition in colors. And let's see, I think magenta will also only affect the cloud here. See. Again, taking it to the left is definitely not an option. It creates this blue transition here, but taking it a little to the right helps ease the transition in color here. And the same should taking the saturation up. Yeah, you can see now we created a more natural transition in the color palette. Let's see the luminance. We don't want to take that down, that ruins our transition. But taking it just a little up helps ease the transition again. Now I can take off all the effects we just did with the color, so you can see what we did with this cloud. You can see now it looks a little more clean, and that's the dangerous part of all this. You're trying to push the file too much, we will get some weird artifacts, but we can clean this up later in Photoshop. So I don't mind pushing the file a little over the limit. We can recover that later. But you can see we brought back some more colors in the clouds. So when we're done with the color section here, we can slide down and go to the split toning part. This part of coloring, I don't like Lightroom for that, because you can see even though we can do some nice things creatively with pushing this, it affects everything in the photo. So it can be very cool, and you should definitely play into this. If you're not interested in bringing your photo to Photoshop, then this is a really strong tool, and try to see if we give the highlights a little bit of red or yellow or dark red tint, does it do anything good? But be careful again, you can really screw up a photo with this. Like, this looks completely unnatural to me, and I hope it does to you as well. And even when you go here, it's more natural with the yellow you can see here, but again, be very careful with it, because when you first put this effect on, then when you bring it to Photoshop later, you cannot revert it. So I prefer to keep it clean. We can do these kind of coloring effects way more effective in Photoshop. So I'm just going to click X here. I'm going to deactivate this panel. But basically, we can color in paint. We can paint in a color in our highlights, which is our brightest parts of the image, and in our shadows. So definitely look into this if you're just going to be using Lightroom. In the details here, that's just the sharpening. On a photo like this, it depends what are you going to use it for. If you want to post it on a mobile phone device, you can go a little more crazy. You can have a high sharpening, high radius and detail. You can see here we're zoomed in on what we're affecting. If you see the masking here, remember, masking is what are we showing, what are we hiding. Hold Command, delete what I said there. Hold Alt, and you can slowly drag it up. And you remember here, when you're masking, white means you're showing, black means you're hiding. So right now, this effect is not going on anything that's black. It's only sharpening things that are white. So right now we're just sharpening the edges of the boat and a little bit of the mountain. I'm just going to take it up a little more. In this way we can push our sharpening further, because we're not going to make everything seem too sharp. This helps us put more focus on our main objects. Again, even though we're kind of making the adjustment local here, the masking of Lightroom is very limited. So you could do this more advanced in Photoshop. The luminance reduction here and the noise reduction with the luminance could be useful for a photo like this, because we did shoot on a pretty high ISO. So with this noise reduction, we can help clean up the noise in the photo. If you look here, this is like a very zoomed in part of the photo. You can also click here to change where we're zoomed in. You can see that is noise in the photo, but it's not so bad if you just want to upload it on a mobile device. You can see if we put this up, we're going to wash away a lot of the noise but we're also going to wash away some of the details. So my tip is bring up the luminance reduction a little bit, but also put up the detail and the contrast to retain some of the details in our photo. Bringing up the luminance can also be a good way to create the soft fairy tale look, so I would definitely recommend using this function. And the color reduction and the detail and the smoothness, just leave that a little up. You can play around with it, but again, I would be careful with this. It's just having a little bit of it can clean up a photo, but having too much can make it seem completely unnatural. The transformation section in Lightroom, again, I would be careful here, but basically you can kind of pull and squeeze in things. We can do that also in Photoshop, and I will be showing you that later. I would recommend watching that lesson instead, because Lightroom's way of doing this is a little more limited. So we're just going to wait for my computer here. There we go. I'm double clicking everything to return to normal. Double clicking that to return it to default. Okay, here is another section that people like to use a lot, the effects panel. If you put this on, you can kind of create this feeling of looking towards the center, but again, for me this effect feels very unnatural and fake. You're just making a circle. Even though you can smooth it out and make it look more natural, I think there are way better ways to do this, and I will be showing you that later. So again, I would not touch this one too much. The color calibration is interesting, but also a very dangerous tool. I, in general, don't like purple tints in my photo. I think it doesn't have a very clean look. So if I feel like there's a little too much of the purple in the photo, I will be taking the tint just a little bit towards green in the shadows. And you can see we're kind of washing away some of the purple tones. Again, if you do it too much, I can show you here. If you overdo it, then it's gonna make the photo seem very boring, and you're gonna compress the colors. So we don't want to pull too much in this, but pushing it just a little bit can help negate if a picture has too many green or purple tones. And in general, I will take it just a little bit towards the green. The hue sliders here are, again, some that can be very useful for some people, but that I try not to use just because we are compressing our colors, and I don't like that. So, for instance, the classic thing people will do is that they will take the blue tones in the photo and they will make it more teal. And at the same time, it's gonna push everything to feel more orange. Now, voila, you have the teal orange feeling, but now for me, it feels like we just have two colors. You can see now the water here and the sky is almost the same teal color. The boats, all the same orange. We just compressed all the colors in our photo. Actually, if you take it to the right side, you're gonna extend the coloring a little by pulling the yellow away from the reds, but at the same time, we're creating a very awkward purple color in the sky. So my best advice would actually be not to touch these at all. It is going to very quickly ruin the natural feeling of the colors in the photo, and it's one of the ways that people most quickly mess up a natural look. So I would again advise, even if you do even if you do like the teal color for some photos or the orange feeling, do very small adjustment with this. You're at a very high risk of just removing all the nuances and palettes of colors in the photo. So that was it for Lightroom. Now we have pretty much gone through all there is, except this one thing, which is the crop. And again, we're going to use that very minimally in Lightroom. I just want to fix the rotation. We could also do this in Photoshop, but what you see here is our horizon line is crooked right now because we didn't take the photo perfectly straight, which is very normal. You can use this tool here and you can just draw the line on the horizon and it will straighten it for you. I think I did that a little wrong. I'm just gonna do it again. Just try to get it as perfect as possible. There we go. Now it's more straight. And you can also do it manually by pressing out here and going up and down until you feel like your photo is straight. So I can do like we did before in the earlier lesson. Now click reset to see the beginning of this photo and click Control to bring back. You can see we still have just focused on making all the details come out in the photo. We have focused on extending the dynamic range. For me, right now the boat here is overexposed and other things like that. We could fix that with some more local adjustments, and if you just want to use Lightroom, I would recommend doing that. But because in our workflow we will fix that later in Photoshop, I'm just going to leave it as it is. The most important thing is that we can look at our histogram here and see that we have a very dynamic photo now, and we don't have a lot of pure blacks and pure whites, which means we have a lot of color. Adding all the contrast and details, we will do that locally in Photoshop. But now we have mastered bringing back all the details and of the colors and light in Lightroom, which is what the software is best at. We have made the raw file very rich in color and data. That was it for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you will watch the next one where we're going to enter the Photoshop realms of editing and where we're going to be really applying a lot of the cool and creative touches, and everything's going to get a little more advanced. But don't forget that the most important thing you're doing when you're editing is getting all the basic things right. If you mess that up here in Lightroom, you can't save it at all in Photoshop. So make sure you get everything nice and clean in Lightroom. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Melvin, and I'll see you in the next lesson.